I will be your master of ceremony for today. I'm a policy officer with the International Rescue Committee. I'm just going to start off with a couple of practical remarks. So today, as yesterday, we are aiming to record all of the sessions, including the breakout sessions. And also we're trying to make this an interactive event. So today, as yesterday, we will have Q&A sessions and you're able to discuss on the chat as well. So there'll be Q&A sessions during the breakouts, but also afterwards when we get back into the plenary, there will be a chance to further discuss and ask questions also about breakouts that you were not able to join. So please put all your questions in the chat, and you can also indicate if you want to be called upon to ask your question live during the session. Otherwise, we ask you to all of you to keep your audio muted and video turned off. We need to preserve the internet bandwidth for participants around the world. So unfortunately, it's better to have only the speakers and the panelists with their videos on. We do recommend you to list your full name and your organization as applicable as your screen name so we can see who you are. Today as well, we will have breaks built in throughout the symposium, so you can just stand up, get refreshed, grab a water or a coffee. So on the agenda for today, I'm going to start with a quick recap of some of the lively discussions that we had yesterday. So we're all starting on the same page. And then we're going to hear from our first keynote speaker, Pierre, from the Kintsugi organization in Kenya. And then we'll have a very quick video which features the work of Tufts University and their Journeys project. And then already will be time for going into the breakout sessions. We have 4 sessions today. The first one is around responses by faith-based or refugee self-help organizations, though crucial, are impossible to scale. So this is the first sort of provocative statement and the first breakout that you have the option to join. The second breakout is about little evidence supports the value of livelihoods programming in displaced settings. The third one is why are digital financial services missing the mark in budgeting up refugee livelihoods? And then finally, nothing new under the sun, innovations in refugee services are at a standstill. So we ask you to vote for the session that you want to go in so that it will be easier once we start to assess your sessions to assign you to the right one. So please vote for the one that you're going to be joining. And we'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that now.
May I just say something really quick, Emily?
Sure.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us again today. As we go into the breakout rooms, there will also be the opportunity for those who might arrive a little later or those who may have not been assigned to please ensure that they go through and assign themselves into the breakout rooms. And you'll see that that's fairly easy. There will be a little breakout room icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And when you click on it and then you hover over the group that you want to be in, you can click on that and then join the breakout room. But we'll let you know if any of you were not assigned previously, either because you were not able to complete the poll in time, or perhaps one of your colleagues if they arrived later in the day. But we will be helping you throughout with this. So just send us a quick message if you are facing any challenges, or if we assign you to the incorrect breakout session. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So we have about 70% that has voted. I think we can probably leave the poll up while I just continue explaining the agenda for today. So after these 4 breakout sessions, we will have a break, and then we will just have a very quick recap of sort of the key things that have happened in each session in plenary, where there will be a space again to discuss further and for Q&A, either from the session that you've joined or from another session that you're interested to hear from. So there'll be some time for discussion then, and then we'll have a closure by Rachel Kite, the dean of the Fletcher School. So that will be our agenda for today. We're at 83% people voted, but I think there's also still maybe people coming in. So maybe we can just leave the poll open. So just as a reminder, this is for you to vote which session you want to go to later on. So let me just continue with sort of a quick recap from what happened yesterday to refresh our minds on the dynamic discussions that we were having. Just also to tell you that there is a report which explains all the high-level findings from the research and including some key policy recommendations, which you can find on the Symposium webpage. It's called Reckoning with Reality, and somebody will also put it in the chat right now so you can go and have a look. So I just wanted to flag 4 key points that came up yesterday in the discussion that I think are important for us sort of to frame to start for today. So the first thing is that rights really do matter to refugees. Foundational issues is really what they care about. Can they access jobs, businesses, move around without fear of going against the law in their country? As Jean-Pierre said yesterday, who's also giving our keynote later, in absence of refugee legal rights and protection provisions, every financial effort to raise refugee livelihoods will always be at risk. So we really need to take their perspectives into account and look at outcomes rather than the means to get there. Focusing just on financial services and how they can be accessed will not be sufficient. And so our research has aimed to understand the realities impacting refugees' financial well-being so we can actually design proper solutions for them. And so secondly, financial health is about more than financial services. There are various ingredients we've seen, and this was explained well yesterday by our lead researchers with some examples from the various countries that the research has taken place in. So there's social networks, friendships, family structures, but also access to information, skills building, educational opportunities, and the ability to work and move freely, which are very crucial for financial health. Of course, we don't say financial services are not important. They remain important at the various stages of refugees' livelihoods progression. So as we've seen yesterday as well, there are stages where as refugee livelihoods hopefully progress for refugees, although often they do remain stuck in a survivalhood phase. But we should consider how we support their financial well-being throughout these different phases and which services should be unlocked at which stage. Certain services will only become important at a later stage, but nevertheless, they remain important. And we should enable refugees to get there and move out of the survivalhood phase, so the demand for services will also grow. Thirdly, the financial health framework can be an important analytical tool to understand when refugees are financially healthy. And this is also, the framework itself is also further explained in the paper, which you can find on the website. Yesterday, Mayada from the Center for Financial Inclusion reminded us that when they first implemented the framework in the US, it was mainly for the benefit of the providers, and the goal was understanding the financial health of customers, which turned out with the main policy messages that emerged that poor people don't save and we need to focus really on people's behaviors. That's not where we want to go. We think that this framework, it's not restricted to this focus on behaviors only, but it will help us to show the contextual factors that enable the financial health outcomes. And if we apply the framework in different contexts, we can see exactly the contextual factors that enable positive or negative outcomes on financial health for refugees. So we do believe this adapted framework is a crucial one for us to be looking at. And then fourthly, finally, we discussed a bit about comparing the situation of refugees to vulnerable host populations, which is obviously a critical point, and definitely we can see that vulnerable hosts and refugees might have similar socioeconomic profiles, are also working in informal sectors, etc. But we should, however, keep in mind that refugees do face particular challenges in terms of accessing rights. And as Julie, our researchers in Kenya yesterday said, informality is different for refugees than for Kenyans in Nairobi. Refugees actually face much more harassment, differential wages, and risks for exploitation. So we should definitely keep that in mind for today. And our study exactly aimed to provide this context and understand the situations refugees face. And so I think from with this context in mind, we we are aiming to have the discussions and move forward to consider these realities in designing our policy and programs. And I just finally want to highlight what Stephanie from the German Development Ministry yesterday said, is that she thought the panel was already insightful for their policymaking and programming. And she described the importance of incorporating a rights-based approach in international development. It's not just an issue of economic opportunities, but also empowerment and human security, she said. And on the policy side, they're also keen to use the outcomes of this research to develop specific policy recommendations for partner countries. So we are very, very pleased with that. And that's exactly the aim of this research. And also, of course, as we are comparing policy contexts throughout the different countries, Uganda, Kenya, Jordan, and Mexico, we are able to actually, get valuable lessons from one countries to the others and learn from each other. So I very much hope that we can, continue these interesting discussions today and have more, challenging insights from all of you. There'll be plenty of space for discussion. So that's my introduction. Now I want to hand over to Jean-Pierre. I think it's a pre-recorded video. Jean-Pierre is the co-founder and managing director of Kintsugi, which is a refugee-led organization based in Nairobi in Kenya. So please can we start the video? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jean-Pierre. I'm a refugee living in Nairobi, Kenya for the last 21 years. I am a co-founder and managing director of a refugee community-based development organization called Kintsugi. Kintsugi is a Japanese term for mending broken ceramics with gold jewelry, and it symbolizes our mission of helping refugees restore their lives and integrate with the host community here in Nairobi. We were established in 2016 with a focus on refugee sustainable livelihood, integration, and refugee human rights. We also focus on women and youth empowerment, offering small grants for small businesses for them to be able to make their ends meet. We also do social, cultural, and sports events, including the African Refugee Peace Marathon, RPM, which we have run for the last 3 consecutive years. African Refugee Peace Marathon brings together refugees, Kenyans, and friends of refugees to celebrate the experience and the resilience of refugees, but also to celebrate the Kenyan people and the Kenyan government for having been so generous in hosting refugees like me for more than 2 decades and allowing us to stay here peace-free. I'm happy to be with you all this morning to welcome you to the second day of the Tufts University Find Symposium. As a refugee and a leader of Kintsugi, I have seen many of the financial challenges refugees face firsthand. For example, it's very difficult for Kenyans to trust refugees because they don't know them. These refugees arrive here without papers or documentation. And these documents take many years to be arranged. Even if they had documents, refugees are not free to travel around the country to trade and pursue business opportunities. It's also more frustrating for refugees to be left out by the government initiatives meant to help encourage entrepreneurship, such as Kenya's Youth Enterprise Fund. At Kintsugi, we have been trying to address some of these challenges by offering small grants to individuals. And one of the cases that has stood out from the people that we have supported is from a mother of 4 to whom we gave $100 in 2018 to go and sell fish. After 3 months, during our General Assembly, she came to give a testimony that her business has been doing well, and she even offered a fish meal for a needy family every weekend. This was an inspiration to us. Our dream for Kintsugi is to become even more life-transforming humanitarian organization promoting sustainable livelihood, integration, and refugee human rights. We invite the international community to join with us in this work and develop a fund to support refugee entrepreneurship and education for school-going children. We also appeal to the international community to consider involving refugees in decision-making processes, because all these programs meant for refugees should be bottom-up. Refugees have understanding and experience on their needs more than anyone else. I hope you have productive discussion and leave this event inspired to continue working to support the economic lives of displaced people worldwide. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. That's really good to hear directly from you, and from hear again about the importance of involving refugees directly in decisions that concern them. Yeah, very good to have that perspective. Now we will look at a very short video of the Journeys project.
Welcome all to the Journeys Project website. Here on the homepage, you can see the publication spotlight with the most recently uploaded publication, and beneath it, a randomly rotating selection of past publications. Below that, we have our most recent fresh finding newsletters, then a slideshow of our visual
Oh, the video stopped. I don't know what happened.
Via the navigation menu, of our visual journeys, illustrated by Anne Moses, and finally, our burgeoning latest news section. Scrolling back to the top, you can access everything on this website via the navigation menu. Under About Us, you can learn more about the project. Under Explore, you can access latest news, content by region of research and origin, and themes. Our publications are divided into essays and articles, reports, and long-distance journeys. Our exciting multimedia section is filled with content including videos, maps, art, and other cutting-edge content, such as the Displacement series. Finally, you can use the menu to find and subscribe to our Fresh Findings newsletter. This website is designed to be...
Apologies, let me play that for you again. Let me see if this time we get it to work. 1 second, and apologies for the technical difficulties.
Welcome all to the Journeys Project website. Here on the homepage, you can see the publication spotlight with the most recently uploaded publication, and beneath it, a randomly rotating selection of past publications. Below that, we have our most recent Fresh Finding newsletters, then a slideshow of our visual journeys, illustrated by Anne Moses, and finally, our burgeoning latest news section. Scrolling back to the top, you can access everything on this website via the navigation menu. Under About Us, you can learn more about the project. Under Explore, you can access latest news, content by region of research and origin, and themes. Our publications are divided into essays and articles, reports, and long-distance journeys. Our exciting multimedia section is filled with content including videos, maps, art, and other cutting-edge content, such as the Displacement series. Finally, you can use the menu to find and subscribe to our Fresh Findings newsletter. This website is designed to be user-friendly. If you have any feedback, we're excited to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our content.
Great, I think that worked now. So yeah, everyone do please check out the website. He has lots of great information, and I think also we'll be having the fine Symposium recordings on there after today. So now it's time to try and move everyone into the breakout sessions. welcome back. I think we will start with our discussion. So I received some notes from the various breakouts that you've all been in, and I'm just going to give some very quick summaries. We're going to keep this quite short, so we have time for a Q&A. And you're very welcome to add to anything I'm saying, to add to discussion based on the discussions you've been having in your groups. And so please also, you can put in the chat any questions. Yeah, so you can please indicate if you would like to ask a question during the Q&A session. So you will be called upon, and you can also raise your hands. So let me quickly just give a flavor of what was discussed in the various breakout sessions. So the first one on responses by faith-based and refugee self-help organizations. It was mentioned that the community-driven organizations like churches, mosques, and refugee-led organizations actually face some challenges accessing larger donors, as they have very specific frameworks and requirements that are not really fit to the local context on the ground. And the donors accept only very low risk. So these relationships are most feasible where donors recognize that the community organizations are actually the experts who knows what the community needs. And these programs are scalable. And the question as they scale should focus on ensuring micro voices are incorporated from the beginning of service development. So programs are addressing the real needs of migrants in each context and provide long-term access to resources. So local actors can not only take leadership, but sustain those programs themselves. So there were some rich discussions, it seems, in that group. In the second group, there was a discussion around livelihoods programming and how, what evidence exists on the value of livelihoods programming in a state setting. So the summary was, it's difficult to know what supports refugee livelihoods because there's not so many studies with robust research designs, but this is actually currently changing. So there's more than 40 randomized evaluations ongoing, and we must continue to reward organizations for using these kind of rigorous designs and transparently reporting results. So the International Rescue Committee, actually, our colleagues have presented our work in Uganda, where we started rural and urban pilot projects, which are based on the research findings of this very study. And these pilots include randomized control trials. And the results from these projects will be used to inform also even larger randomized control trials that we will conduct. So there's a lot of stuff ongoing, and we will have results from that hopefully in the coming months. So that, yeah, keep following this discussion, I would say. Then the third one was the one that I actually joined myself. So we had a great discussion around digital financial services and also digital humanitarian cash. So Swati, a researcher from Jordan, started with outlining what's happening in Jordan. So where refugees can actually access mobile money, at least Syrian refugees. But in most, and there has been with COVID and stuff, there has been quite an uptake, but in most cases, it was just to withdraw the money and then they stopped using the service. So they haven't really used it for other transactions. And so we had Matthias, a colleague from GIZ, point out that if we want to see this use of mobile money increase, there needs to be use cases that actually have potential for refugees, and they have to see the value in using. And so also our colleague George from the IRC pointed out that there are various challenges from using these new and still underdeveloped services. There can be glitches that lead to lower trust. And the lack of grievance redressal leaves these risks to refugees unaddressed and then further erodes the trust. And so these kind of small issues like, you want to make a payment and it doesn't work and your money gets stuck, this can have a huge importance in the lives of economically vulnerable people. So this is an important one to think about. And then again, there was, I must say, a lot of consensus in the session, again, about the rights issue and the importance of the regulatory barriers, addressing those barriers that prevent refugees from accessing services. So we had our colleague Ida from Safaricom sharing the example from Kenya, where the framework is very restricted. And UNHCR, John also highlighted that these informal workarounds that refugees then create, such as borrowing SIM cards, etc., also represent risks. And overcoming these regulatory challenges will not automatically lead to solutions, but they are a prerequisite for any progress to happen. So what also Ida from Safaricom was saying, that if we had an open regulatory environment in Kenya, there were several services that they would love to offer to refugees, and she would love to be really innovative and is very passionate about this. So yeah, a very big call towards joint advocacy here. So that was great to hear. And then finally we have the breakout, Nothing New Under the Sun, around innovations in refugee services. So the panel focused on innovations for promoting financial inclusion and the sort of political and social challenges that arise with such programming. So we had an IRC colleague from Jordan who was discussing sort of the challenges and successes of the Jordan Compact, and importance of including refugee voices and the perspective of community-based organizations, again, in global and domestic refugee policy making. So this was sort of a policy perspective. And Helen from the Center for Global Development gave an example of two key innovative programs that are ongoing, which is the regularizations of Colombians in Venezuela and the Skill Partnership for Refugees model, and I don't know in which country that was, which is used to promote the development and decrease brain drain. They also had interventions from Karim from Skill Lab, who has a startup utilizing artificial intelligence in order to help refugees create formal resumes and achieve job placement by documenting their informal experiences and partnering with public, private, and nonprofit actors to promote hiring. And then finally, they had interventions from Nat from the Lead Global FinTech, who created a blockchain money transfer system, which is currently operational in East Africa, that enables refugees to transfer money digitally when they are physically, where they are physically crossing borders. So yeah, some talk about technology also in this session, which seems it could be valuable for pushing for innovative refugee policies. And then finally, two key themes that arise were how to improve political will of governments to promote refugee-centric policies and the importance of including refugee voices in policies. So I think there's, across the sessions, there have been quite some themes coming out again around the rights, around the right policies, and including refugee voices. So that's really great to see. I don't know in the meantime if we have any questions already coming up in the chat. I don't think so, but please, if you want to raise your hand, if you want to add anything to what I've said from your session that you think is worth mentioning for the whole group, please raise your hand or type it in the chat. Thank you. Now is your chance. Kim, go ahead, please.
Sure. So this is for Karim, and I had the benefit of learning about Skill Lab about a year and a half ago when you came to visit us. And my question for you is, at that time, your thinking was that it works with populations that are in a booming economy. And I'm wondering if that's still your thinking, or have you been able to pilot this or even think about piloting it in economies that aren't quite as booming? So that's part one. And part two is you might want to connect with Father Pat, who was telling us in our session that Tijuana is in fact a booming economy. So that could be an interesting partnership.
Thanks very much, Kim, for the question. It's nice to see you again, certainly after all this time has passed. You're absolutely right. I think when we were doing initial analysis in our early days, we figured that not necessarily booming economies, but economies in which there were jobs available for individuals that were looking for employment was a critical factor in terms of being able to get people to have benefits out of our skill profiling and career orientation solution. I think since then, I would say we've been very surprised to learn about the benefits that individuals themselves tend to report to us about them having in situations where we're surprised because we did not target those particular economies or geographies, let's say. A year ago, for example, we were not operating within, the Kenyan context at Dadaab or Kakuma refugee camps, nor were we operating in West Africa, in Guinea, for example, in Conakry. These were places that we didn't think, given the nature of the labor markets there or our understandings of them, would be optimal situations for us to actually try to have an impact. And what we found actually is that our growth in terms of traction that we've received with partners has actually been growing in economies like Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, much faster than even our quote unquote core market, which is Europe. So I think we've learned not to sort of prejudice ourselves towards booming economies, although it is helpful to be working in an environment where there are jobs available. And I would also add, lastly, that we've also started to work in contexts, and some of these contexts or these kind of programs have been mentioned throughout this symposium, contexts in which innovative ways to connect individuals to employment opportunities that circumvent the local labor market by going to digital and remote work. We're still in the early phases of piloting these things, but the initial indications are very, very positive. So, and on the second part of your question, I'd be more than happy to connect with Father Pat, but I would also say anybody that's not in a, working within a booming economy, we're very interested in working in those contexts now as well. So thanks very much for the question.
Thank you so much, Karen. That's really interesting, and then seems more interesting pilots going on. So we should all stay connected. Please, anyone else who wants to intervene with any observation or question, please raise your hand, or write in the chat if that's more comfortable for you. Maria, go ahead.
Yes, we had a question that we were not able to cover during our session, so I just want to repose it. And it was a question from Kim, mostly to Father Pat, but I'd be curious to hear other people's perspectives. And that is regarding the gender dynamics and how COVID has perhaps impacted gender, especially within these booming economies that Karim was mentioning. Has there still been an ability to find work, to find support for women, especially, and women with children particularly, would be my interest.
Is there anyone here who would like to direct a question to?
I don't know if Father Pat is still with us. If he's not, I'd be just curious to hear other people's perspectives as well, and what they've been seeing on the ground. Karim, I don't know if you'd like to take this one too.
I'm happy to take it in the absence of Father Pat currently and talk about our experiences there. Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself, but I think that one of the really interesting learnings that we've had through some of our existing projects, in particular recently in the Latin American context with the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS, working in Panama, Ecuador, and Peru, who recently issued a sort of an internal report on the effects of using our skill profiling technology in refugee livelihoods programs. One of the surprising, on their part, surprising findings was that our tools seem to be particularly beneficial, or the skill profiling particularly beneficial for victims of gender-based violence, particularly women. Reason being that the psychological effect of removing yourself from that trauma and focusing on the future, as well as sort of that process of gathering your skills and thinking about how you might use them in a new opportunity in the future, led to higher rates of participation or willingness to participate in job-seeking activities and career planning activities than was ever expected. So I think that we still have a lot of anecdotal evidence in this area, but in particular also in other contexts where we work, one of the biggest benefits that we see through our approach is the ability to capture informally acquired skills. So one of the biggest sort of areas of underappreciated work and skills is domestic work. whether that's men or women, but typically it's women that are burdened with this more than men in most societies, is that work involved in domestic work, raising a family, children, and so on and so forth, is oftentimes entirely overlooked in terms of labor market and employability programs. And those kinds of skills that get captured. I mean, any parent in this room will tell you that they're an expert at conflict management, time management, and things like that. But that doesn't show up on a CV, as an experience as a parent, and those are the things that I think that particularly when it comes to gender inclusion have been very beneficial. And that's the feedback that we receive from our clients on that front.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Maria, for bringing up the gender point, which is absolutely crucial. I see there's some other comments in the chat. I also wonder if there's any IRC colleague that might want to comment on the gender aspect. I know also recently the Global Gender Gap Report came out, which actually has documented that due to COVID, we see now a rollback in terms of achieving gender equality worldwide. With it's been a setback by a whole generation, I think more than 30 years. So definitely we see those impacts. Maybe Lena, I see you put a comment in the chat around the gender gap in digital financial services. Would you like to comment on that? If you can unmute you. Oh, sorry.
Can I unmute myself now?
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. I just we're not really seeing any progress on the gender gap, especially not in the digital sphere. And the Finclusion network has done a lot of very interesting research and work around that recently. So I would invite people to also look at what they've done. Yeah, I mean, it remains, and we have to keep looking at not just the access to the opportunities for income and all of that we talked a lot about this symposium, but also the ancillary services that are necessary to allow people to work, especially if they need to work outside of their home. And I think this whole idea that was mentioned before as well by Karim, that we have to recognize the work that goes on in the home and include home-based businesses and the ability, the preference actually by many refugees, but also by many hosts, women that have a double burden of home care plus income generation, that it is easier to do it from home. It is much easier if you have a network that can help you take care of the kids and do the shopping, etc., while you're also working, whether from home or outside. So the whole sort of more holistic approach to seeing what the barriers are, but on the other hand, what type of support solutions need to be in place for people to be able to exploit the opportunities for income generation that there may be, however small they may be, in their environment, are really important. And again, it's not a specific issue for refugees, it's an issue for most people who are not financially healthy yet.
Great, thank you for those comments, Lene. I think, Kim, you had a question as well for Nat. Do you want to pose your question?
I did not have a question, but okay. I really appreciate what Lena just said. That's the reality that we're with. There's just a giant gender gap. So thank you for that, Lena.
Yeah, but I mean, in the chat, you posted a question for Nat on businesses.
Oh, yes, sorry, I did. Okay, sorry. So this is for Nat, if he's still on, which is, I know originally that your organization was focusing on refugees, Leaf Global FinTech. And I'm wondering if that's still your focus now. Is that enough of a market for you to have a viable business, or are you broadening it? So just a question about your business strategy.
I'll just chime in on Matt's behalf. I think he's had to log off. He was calling us into the breakout session from a refugee camp in Rwanda. So that's very much still the focus, and lots of interesting things to say. So definitely watch the recorded session.
Thank you, Julie.
Great. I think Sarah also posed a question around Sarah Ward. Do you want to pose your question, maybe yourself? Let's see if we can unmute you.
Right. Hi.
So otherwise,
Oh, I've been unmuted. Look at me.
oh, I think we can hear you now.
Can you? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Sorry to have sort of popped in and glad to be unmuted. That's always fun. And looking at the different activities that everybody is bringing to this, I'm actually curious to sort of follow up old hands or people who've been around a bit. There was an organization many years ago called Samasource that's still functional in the space and working in the space. And I'm wondering if any of the newer entrepreneurs who are putting in the social solutions and the tech solutions and the AI solutions there are looking at they're now called Sama, but are looking at that model and if it's still functional and how, how it's changed since that began. So if I don't know if anybody's had experience or just.
Yeah, I think David was also answering in the chat. David, please go ahead and answer.
Yeah, hi, Sarah. We tried working with Summersource in Nairobi a couple of years ago, and well, probably three years ago, and it didn't work. It was very corporate. They were really expecting quite a high level of sort of engagement from refugees that the refugees were not always capable of because of the various complexities they have to negotiate. So we moved to a group called Connexio, who come out of Station F in Paris, and they work with some of the work platforms such as Upwork, and they have agreements with some of the platforms, and we've worked with them in a project in Malawi, which we're scaling to other countries and in the process of scaling at the moment. They've been very good to work with. Having said all that, Summersource came back to us. They actually got a workshop near our office in Nairobi, and they've had a change of management, and I think they're really seeking to re-engage, and they sound like they've revised their models. So I am actually interested in talking with them again.
Great. Thank you, David, for specifying. I would like to give Joscha the floor. I think he also had a question for Karim, actually. Joscha, do you want to pose your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Annalene. And I was just thinking, because I really like the approach of Karim and his skills lab. And I was just thinking, because making informal skills and experiences and so on visible, this maybe translating it into the financial sector, it could as well mean on how to build a track record. And if there's a chance as well, he sees to make other interesting points visible for financial service providers in order to make them creditworthy, refugees creditworthy, and to build a track record. If just wanted to get Karim's view on how he sees the opportunities to make use of AI in a similar way for the financial sector. Thanks.
Thank you, Joscha, for the question. I have to say that I'm a little bit out of my depth, since our experience is less in the sort of financial services space, and so I'm not that familiar what financial service providers sort of expect. But we do have some touch points where I think there is relevance. First of all, in terms of our approach in embedding skills into financial service provisions, particularly. I think one of the themes that I am aware of when it comes to financial service providers, one of the big things is KYC, right? Is knowing your customer and being able to prove identity, for example. And there's a lot of innovation being done in this space, I think, particularly with things like blockchain technology in order to verify a person's background, in order to make them sort of their creditworthiness more, data for creditworthiness analysis more available. And I think that linking verifiable information about a person's past in terms of employment history, work, income, and so on and so forth can be part of that broader data set that feeds into a KYC platform for financial service providers. But if your question is related to whether the technology of AI itself could be used in a similar way, independent of sort of skills background and employment history, I think I'm a little bit out of my depth to answer that. It would be very interesting to explore. I would be curious to know or to think about conceptually why AI over what is already being sort of like touted as the standard in the tech space for this particular area, which is blockchain. So on the first part of the question, that's my perspective. On the second part, I'm sorry if I disappoint.
No, that's really great. Great to hear. Thank you, Karim. Am I missing any other questions in the chat? I think there's some discussion. I think also I see a colleague from IRC has posted a link to a report where we've been exploring sort of digital gig economy work, which is interesting for this discussion. So I recommend you to have a look. I think I don't see any other questions, and I think we're about at time to move towards our closing. But Jean-Pierre has raised his hand, so I'll just give you the chance, Jean-Pierre. And then I think that will be the last question or comments. Can we unmute Jean-Pierre?
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you, Jean-Pierre.
Or can you hear me? Yeah, I have followed the discussions from all the presentations and all the questions that have been answered. But I was just wondering where I can categorize the refugees in Kenya. I'm sure in both Kakuma camps and Dadaab, there are really no formal financial institutions that are actually catering for refugees who might want to probably do some businesses in a formal way. I'm sure some research have been done, but what probably the results were that refugees struggled on their own actually to do some businesses with the local communities. And of course, the results show that there have been some kind of improvements and even the contribution to the national economic growth by refugees themselves, but there is no formal financial institution that actually supporting refugees or those who want to be entrepreneurs. And this is the same case for urban refugees, like Nairobi, where you stay. There's no institution that actually is supporting refugees. I really don't know. This is where I've been actually, my question was actually oscillating, wondering how can these financial institutions come and establish a model where they can support refugees who really want to actually make their life through entrepreneurship, especially working with the local grassroots communities, because I think someone has presented that there is a need for the trainings and training circles and the leadership development for small community-based organization for them to actually be able to carry on those entrepreneurship solutions among the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. That's a really important question. I wonder if there's anyone who would like to answer who has potentially some information about Kenya or upcoming opportunities. I know with the International Rescue Committee, we have started a big program in Kenya focused on urban refugees. So I could share some information on that one with you, Jean-Pierre. If there's not anyone else to answer this one now. I think it's time to move to the closing for today. So thank you so much, everyone who contributed with questions, with answers, with discussions. And then I will introduce Rachel Kite, who's the Dean of the Fletcher School, to give some closing remarks. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And I've just been listening in for the last few minutes and wishing that I was doing this work on the ground. I was getting a feeling from when I worked with the Access to Finance teams in the IFC many years ago. So first of all, I think I want to thank you all for participating. And really, I think more than that, thank you for the work that you do. It's really critical work for some of the most vulnerable within our societies, and so thank you. We don't say it enough, I'm sure. The past few days have really given us a glimpse into the daily life and the livelihoods of refugees in 4-country contexts. So, as you know, in Jordan, Kenya, Mexico, Uganda. And I think it was particularly important for us to hear the voices of our local researchers in Kenya and Jordan, as well as those from the refugee-led initiatives of Jean-Pierre and Abou Kadir Hussein. I think it was striking that through all of these studies, which are really from the bottom up, from the ground up, local studies, that 5 themes really do emerge across all the 4 countries. And I understand from the Fletcher team that this is, we're finding the same thing in other work that we're doing in Tunisia. And so I think it's important that we, are learning, that financial inclusion policies need to be interoperable or built upon host government policies, and which must then include refugee rights and opportunities. And I think that that's very important finding for future research policy evolution and for the community, broader community and decision-making community to take on board. I think it's important that we understand that we need to continue to evolve financial services as we understand more about the diversification within the livelihoods of the refugee population. I think it's important that financial service providers, all of them, bundle their services so that they can work for the refugee population rather than sort of setting up separate or standalone services or products. I think it's important that as we understand more about the dynamics in displacement, that really the solutions that we're coming up with are durable and help underpin the journey to stability and safety that the displaced are going through. And then I think it's really important that the financial health framework, which has to be modified for displaced people, that is actually a useful framework. And of course, financial services is only one part of what it means to be financially healthy. So I think it's interesting that these sort of themes are emerging across all of this local research, and that this could be an impetus to the approaches of the sector and to policy going forward. The implications for that, for the comprehensive refugee response framework, I think are important, and I look forward to seeing that carried forward. So at Tufts and KU, it was not our intention to sort of come in with any sort of defined end goal in mind, but I do think that our findings support the framework, and I hope that we can see robust collaboration going forward to help advance our understanding, but actually make a difference on the ground in the way the services are provided to this particular part of the population. We couldn't be here today if it weren't for the extraordinarily generous support of GIZ and the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. I'm delighted that we're working together with them, and as long-term proponents of financial services and the evolution of access to finance. I hope that we can continue to work together with them. The Open Society Foundation is obviously very important in this work, and last but by no means least, the International Rescue Committee. But I really would like to thank from the bottom of our hearts here at Fletcher, our university partner, the Catholic University Ingolstadt. I've heard from the Fletcher team what an extraordinary partner you are, and I look forward someday to meeting you in person, either here or on your campus in your neck of the woods. So let us move together. We are an important community. You are providing critical services to a critically vulnerable part of the population, one which has extraordinary variety and depth and dignity to it. And everything that we do needs to continue to lift people up. The comprehensive refugee response framework is important. We can breathe life into it with our work. And I wish you well. I wish you to stay healthy and safe. And please continue your collaboration and keep bending the arc a little bit more towards justice, dignity, and fairness for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for those great last words. And thanks so much to the Fletcher School and Tufts University for supporting this important work, and for all the great support from your colleagues as well in organizing this symposium. We've come to an end for today. I'll just remind you that the recordings will be up on the website, so you can all have a look at what we discussed here again. But for now, I also wish you well and a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.